Welcome to the latest edition of the ES DraftCast with Tony Pauline, Tim Wood, here alongside the man, the myth, the legend, Tony Pauline. How are you, sir?
Okay, little recuperating from a Super Bowl that I think was very disappointing for everyone. Not the game that people had hoped for. Kind of dragged defensive battle, which I guess isn't bad. But I guess moving forward, what are we going to do with our Sundays? That's the thing we all have to decide. I know what I'm going to do as far as the work, but and there won't be any football on TV for a long, long while now.
Oh, so you're not watching? You're not watching UFL?
No, I don't watch. I'll watch the Olympic football, not the UFL. I tune into it once in a while just to see if I could recognize the names and what I thought of the guys when they were in college. But no, I do not sit. I can't sit in front of the television and watch that.
No,
Sorry.
no. There's got to be a little break here, and it's yeah, Listen, I'm a Patriots fan, but I was put on my best face ahead of this, but listen, May did not play well throughout the playoffs. He looked progressively younger and more exposed with each game, and they still found a way to win, but you can't play that way in the Super Bowl and expect good results. They got 19-7, they got close second and 3, bad choice on the interception, and it just continued to spiral from there. So it's like, you just can't give a team like Seattle that many openings.
I was surprised they didn't do more to help him. I really was. Now I'm not in the locker room. I'm not in the building, but obviously he was struggling in the pocket. He kept staring down receivers. I was surprised they didn't try and move him out of the pocket and throw on the move. I don't know if that's part of their arsenal. I don't know why they didn't get Travion Henderson more involved, especially earlier on, because whenever he touched the ball, he was picking up 6, 7, 8 yards. He's an explosive ball carrier. But
Those
again,
sweeps outside were working, and they just kept going away from it. And then, there were third and threes at times where it's like, why he didn't even look to run. I mean, he's a running quarterback. Didn't even look to run. Now, listen, he admitted an injection before the game on the shoulder. We knew that the shoulder was not in a good place. All right, they did the best he did the best he could, but the shoulder was he was not right, and you could tell it. You could tell. I mean, they make great halftime adjustments all season, Tony. They've been a great halftime adjustment team. They get the ball to start the third quarter. Awful 3 and out, especially third down through just an awful out pass that was deflected. Almost, Booty had to break up the interception essentially. Um, so it's just there was so many signs that it just wasn't right. And like you said, we did an article on Essentially Sports during the week about how Buffalo had created the blueprint in that second Buffalo game of just the pressure and how to make him uncomfortable. And the rest of the league knew it. It's like you said, how did they not protect him more, knowing what what hurt them the most, especially in that Buffalo game, and what the rest of the league saw out of that. And so it was just, I mean, all the credit in the world to Seattle,
right.
right? All the credit in the world to McDonald, and the guy that we're going to talk about up front here, Klint Kubiak. Great game plan. Great, and you know, Darnold was not spectacular. They got Walker running quick and early and often, but Darnold didn't make mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the shoulder, you would have thought the pounding he was taking in the pocket, they would have thrown some bubble screens, some receiver
Yeah,
screens, get the ball into Mario Douglas's hands right away, get the
yeah.
ball in Stephon Diggs' hands right away. You never saw it. And I mean, there were a couple of times I'm watching the game and he's looking left, he's not moving his head, he's in the pocket. Like I said, listen, August of 2025, September 2025, no one thought the Patriots were going to be in the Super Bowl. So
Nope.
they deserve a ton of credit there, and they've got a bright future. And we can sit here and criticize them, but they went beyond expectations.
Yep.
And you look at the rest of that division. Buffalo's going in reverse. Miami, you don't know. The Jets, you don't know. You look at the Patriots. In fact, I was in the gym this morning, as I am every morning, and ESPN had the betting odds for 2026, And I couldn't believe that the Patriots were listed below the Buffalo Bills. I mean, you look at the two organizations, and they're going in different directions. So, credit to the Patriots. Hopefully it's just a blip on the screen for that organization. I got to tell you though, I'm a Jet season ticket holder. I would have loved to seen the Patriots win because I would have loved to seen Robert Kraft, who should be in the Hall of Fame, who, in my opinion, was disrespected in the Hall of Fame voting, hold that Super Bowl trophy up. I thought that would have been great after what
Just
went
like the
on.
Deflate Gate year, just like the FU to the NFL, But yeah, it
I thought it would
wasn't
have
to
been great
be.
if he held up, and to Woody Johnson as well. Jets. That's another story. I thought it would have been great if they had won and he had held up after not getting voted into the Hall of Fame, which he so richly deserves.
The what you said before though is spot on. It's all the things they did to get here. And that's what, listen, I've been saying playing with house money for, I mean, since 8 wins, basically. Like everything else has been gravy in terms of, so, but okay, now we're here. Why are you going away from all the things that worked? Like you said, all the just all the little things that worked throughout the season that got them in a flow, that got them out of bits of trouble, that kept May in his zone. All those little things on the offense, especially, they weren't doing. So it was bizarre. It was bizarre, but it was boy, it was exciting to see just for a guy like Darnold to get his due, to get his trophy, and Seattle to get, they've been disrespected throughout the year. I've been hearing all year that okay, now the Rams, even with their own division, it was like, are they the third best team in their own division? It's like, no, this is especially give these coaches 2 weeks to plan. Forget about it.
In the day and age of open free agency and salary cap football, coaching is more important. Coaching down the line, the head coach, the coordinators, the position coaches, is more important than ever before. And you saw two younger, outstanding head coaches. One guy's a first time head coach in McDonald. You look at Chicago this year, and then you look at the franchises that continue to struggle and the coaching situations that they have. So coaching in free agency in the day and age of unfettered free agency with the salary cap is as important as anything, eh, as important, if not more important than talent, because you're trying to fill in positions with inexpensive players because you're paying your stars so much and you got to keep under the salary cap. And I think that was proven last night by the Seattle Seahawks. I think it was proven by the New England Patriots in their ride to the Super Bowl. It was proven by the Denver Broncos. And I think it was also proven by the Buffalo Bills, who once again can't get over the hump into the Super Bowl.
Houston Texans. I mean, to a certain extent, in terms of getting that season turned around, that could have gone. That could have been a full year dumpster fire, and they turned it around enough to get it right. And coaching matters for sure. And speaking of coaching, um, this is a story that you were out in front of.
Yep.
Klint Kubiak officially announcing that
Yeah.
he's taken the Raiders job. Um, Not a shock, but at the same time, like it played out as expected from your end.
Absolutely. I mean, what is once they won the Super Bowl, what does Kubiak have to prove in Seattle? I mean, Seattle desperately wanted him to stay. They were offering him huge money. There's more downside to Kubiak staying with Seattle than there is upside. He's won the Super Bowl. After Minnesota basically brought Sam Darnold over off the trash heap and kind of resurrected his career. Kubiak took it to the next level. The one thing about Darnold that I had a concern of coming out of USC was turnovers. He turned the ball over a lot, bad interceptions, fumbles when he was scrambling. And what Seattle, I believe they said yesterday, was the first team in the NFL history to go through the playoffs without a single turnover. So it just makes complete sense for Kubiak. And you got to strike when the iron's hot. Bobby Slowak, you mentioned Houston Texans before. Bobby Slowak in 2023 the offensive coordinator of the Houston Texans, was the hot name in the coaching as a coaching candidate in coaching circles. He basically developed C.J. Stroud. They had a nice run through the playoffs. Everybody was focused on Slowick. The following year, C.J. Stroud struggled, and Slowick was fired. So we went from a hot candidate, coaching candidate, to basically on the unemployment list and
A
barely
trash
9 months.
heap. Yeah. And
What I'm going to be interested to see is the terms and conditions of the contract, because I have a feeling that Kubiak is going to come away with the richest contract for a first year head coach. And the reason I say that is this, you know, if you followed what we talked about, basically from the Shrine Bowl, it was Raiders or bust for Kubiak. But as I mentioned last week, it was also Kubiak or bust for the Raiders, because if they don't get Klint Kubiak, they really don't have too many options at this point in time. And as I said in the article from the Senior Bowl, Kubiak has all the leverage. So what's going to be interesting to me is what those terms and conditions are. I'm sure the Raiders are paying Kubiak a large sum of money. He's going to go there. He's going to get, if not his quarterback, the quarterback in Fernando Mendoza. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, sometimes
and
coordinators turn out
probably
to be.
huge staff money, right? I mean, when you talk about first year coach, he's probably going to have more of a staff budget than any
Right.
first year coach too, right?
Well, it's gonna that will be interesting to see, because most of those guys are already taken. I
Yeah.
mean, most of the guys have got jobs for 2026, so that may be a little bit more difficult. It'd be interesting. I mean, sometimes coordinators turn out to be real good coaches. Look at Ben Johnson in Chicago this year. And then sometimes they don't. Look at Ben Johnson's counterpart with the Detroit Lions, Aaron Glenn with the Jets. So,
Yeah.
there's no sure thing, but he was the hot name. He had the leverage. He's going to go to Vegas now, where he's from. He's going to get the quarterback in Fernando Mendoza, and he's going to get every shot possible. Mark Davis wants to win out there. Mark Davis, he gets a lot of slings and arrows, but he wants to do the right thing. It's just a matter of listening to the right people. The Raiders got their guy and their head coach on February 9th. They're going to get their quarterback in April and Fernando Mendoza. They need a lot of pieces, but obviously they're heading in the right direction.
And I mean, listen, they get their tight end healthy. They get Genty moving even further in the right direction.
Sure.
Um, sure up the defense. Make some good draft picks. How do you feel about Tom Brady being in the room?
We'll see. I mean, he made a lot of promises last year. He promised that he was going to bring in Ben Johnson. That didn't work out. He promised that he was going to bring Matthew Stafford to the Raiders. Matthew Stafford used the Raiders as a
Leverage, yeah.
leveraging tool to get a huge contract with the Rams. I mean, listen, sometimes great players, and Tom's the greatest of them all at the quarterback position, as far as I'm concerned, and analysts don't, make great personnel decisions and don't make great personnel people. I think it's basically to be determined, TBD. With Brady, I think he's got some upside. I think you have to be careful. I mean, he wants to bring in some of the guys that he was with in Tampa Bay. Uh, I don't think you can say either way at this point in time.
I don't I just never liked it from the jump. It just that didn't feel like it felt like a weird fit in terms of just where he wanted to get into ownership. But and like you said, the bringing in some of the it all depends who you bringing in from Tampa Bay. All right, like are you bringing in cronies or are you bringing in legit minds that can really, if you trying to replicate the Patriot way in some way and form, are you bringing in the right people to do that? That's my biggest. I mean, but listen, year one to year two, I was one of his biggest critics on the broadcasting. Okay, and I loved me some Tom Brady, right? But year one to year two, he got marketably better, markedly better in terms of his broadcasting skills. So if he puts the same effort into the front office side of things as he put into becoming a better broadcaster, who knows? Like you said, it's a big old TBD, but with the TB on it, it's going to be in the forefront for sure in terms of a lot of eyeballs. Um, does Mark Davis want that? Does Mark Davis want to be Jerry Jones?
No, no, absolutely not.
Yeah,
He doesn't want to be involved. He wants to hire the right people, which he's tried to do. If you talk to people who know Mark Davis, they like Mark Davis. They
yeah.
think he's a good guy. They think, unlike Jerry Jones, who wants to sit at the head of the table of the war room on draft day, Mark Davis wants someone else to make the decisions. He wants to be part of it, but he wants to make the decisions, and it's just that he has taken advice from the wrong people through the years, which has led him to the first pick of the 2026 NFL draft. So no, I mean he comes from obviously a football family. I mean his dad, obviously Al Davis, you know, made his money or relied on football and the NFL and his team, the Oakland Raiders, the Los Angeles Raiders, wherever they were playing, as a prime source of revenue. But I think Davis wants to win, and he doesn't necessarily have to be in front of the camera all the time. He wants the right people in place. We'll see if it works out for him this time. If the person who has his ear, in this case Tom Brady, is steering him in the right direction.
Heavy NFL discussion up front. We got a great interview coming up in a little bit with uh, Devin Jackson from the Philadelphia Inquirer, draft analyst for the Inquirer, talking Eagles focus and just things that he saw out of the Shrine and Senior Bowl with Tony. But let's get into the main topic on the draft end right now, Tony. Fernando Mendoza,
Yep.
and talking about not so much not so much focused on throwing at the combine, talking more about throwing at pro day.
Which should come as a surprise to no one. I mean, the top quarterbacks rarely throw at the combine anymore, and they rely on their pro day, which is why a good combine throwing workout is seen as valuable in the scouting community. Cam Ward didn't throw at the combine last year. The prior year, Jaden Daniels didn't throw. Caleb Williams didn't throw. Drake May didn't throw. Michael Penix did throw, and Michael Penix threw extremely well. Now, I really like what Fernando Mendoza said because he was honest, and it's something people don't understand. I mean, you go to the combine, your throwing workout is unlike anything in the pre-draft process. You're basically throwing to receivers that you may have met 48 hours previously, and there's no rapport there. It's not like a 3-day process like the Shriner Senior Bowl where you can get in cohesion with these guys. You basically met these guys 48 hours beforehand. There's no timing. There's no rapport with them. Uh, and the fact is, Mendoza has played on Lucas Oil Stadium field before. He beat Ohio State in the Big Ten title game, but most of these guys have never been on the field at Lucas Oil Stadium, which is another factor. The lighting, the feel, everything else. That's why, if you watch very carefully, if you watch the NFL Combine coverage, and I'm there for all the workouts, Saturday night, the night before the uh, quarterback workout is, you'll see the quarterbacks out on the field throwing the ball just to get a feel of the surroundings, just to get a feel for what's happening. So you go back. I had written an article at Essentially Sports where people were telling me, people not affiliated with Fernando Mendoza, they wouldn't do anything except go meet with the Raiders because he's going to be the first pick of the draft. Go meet and have your medical with the Raiders, and that's it. Mendoza said, "What's the obvious? I'm not going to throw at the combine because I don't know these receivers. I'll wait to pro day." And then he said, he was going to wait to pro day to help his guys, to help, Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper Jr. and Riley Nowakowski, the tight end that's come from nowhere, because he knows these guys. He's got a rapport with these guys. He's got timing with these guys. He's going to be working out in a facility that he is very familiar with, a facility that he's been working in for almost a year now. I think the most interesting thing for me, as far as Fernando Mendoza's pro day, it's not going to have any bearing on where he's selected because he's going to be the first pick of the draft. I want to see if Charlie Becker's there. Charlie Becker is the sophomore receiver who really had some huge games. He was good in the playoffs. He was good in the national championship game. He basically was phenomenal in that Penn State game. It'll be interesting to see if he's out there running routes and catching the passes, even though he's not draft eligible. 3 years ago, I mentioned C.J. Stroud. I was at the Ohio State Pro Day that year with C.J. Stroud, with Jackson Smith-Njigba, with Paris Johnson, and Marvin Harrison, who was a true sophomore, was on the field taking part in the drills that day, catching passes from C.J. Stroud, which is kind of ironic because Marvin Harrison basically did nothing the following year when he was draft eligible, well, and became the fourth pick of the draft. So, good for Mendoza for being honest. When people say, well, I'm going to wait to my pro, it's like, listen, I don't know these receivers. I'm going to wait to help my guys. Shouldn't come as a shock. The fact that he's going to throw at pro day, I think speaks a lot because he's a lock to be the number one pick of the draft.
Absolutely. It's now when you mentioned Becker, is it more you're curious in terms of does Becker show up to help himself or does he show up to help Mendoza? Is that where's the
Well,
curiosity there?
it's going to be more to help Mendoza. I mean, because to go back to that Marvin Harrison workout, Marvin Harrison was the fourth pick of the draft. Jackson Smith-Njigba was what in the early 20s.
Yep.
But on that pro day, Jackson Smith-Njigba was JSN. I'll just call him was the better receiver in the workout. I mean, the routes he was running was incredible. There was a significant difference. If Becker shows up and catches the ball, it's going to be more, I believe, to help Fernando Mendoza than it is himself because he's not draft eligible and a lot can happen in a year.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Carson Swessinger. Congratulations, Defensive Rookie of the Year. What's your take in terms of how that in his performance,
Yeah.
how that's going to impact the 2026 draft?
Well, Carson Swessinger is a true off-ball linebacker, and off-ball linebackers are not seen as a priority on draft day, especially in the first round. Pass rushers, cornerbacks, quarterbacks, defensive tackles. Off-ball linebackers are sort of like running backs. They're second priority, second tier priority come draft weekend. Now, especially first round of the draft, I should say. I remember last year writing about how there were a lot of teams late in round one that like Carson Swessinger that were considering him. He falls out of round one. Cleveland Browns scoop him up with the first pick of the second round, becomes Defensive Rookie of the Year, and he was good the whole year. He was good the entire
Oh
year.
yeah.
They a high ankle sprain. There was concern he was going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. He played the next week. He was terrific. They shut him down the final week. Do I think it's going to impact it? Yes, because I think that more teams will be prone to taking off-ball linebackers, really good off-ball linebackers, earlier than they would have in the past. C.J. Allen of Georgia. I think he's going to go much earlier than people are projecting. They're thinking late first round. I think C.J. Allen could be a mid-first round pick. Anthony Hill of Texas, another guy that people are projecting later on. I think he could go late first round. Deontay Lawson of Alabama, another guy who potentially could go late first round. I think what Carson Swessinger has done is he's opened the door for teams that usually wouldn't consider an off-ball linebacker in the first 32 picks. Say, well, look at the impact that this guy has. We like a C.J. Allen. We like an Anthony Hill of Texas. We like a Deontay Lawson of Alabama. Let's take him now.
It goes from okay, well we could wait last year, and then it became this. So now it becomes the hot commodity, right? Trying to capture the next version of him.
Exactly. And I haven't even mentioned Arvell Reese, who is going to be a very early draft pick. I think people are going to mistakenly broad brush him or paint him as a pass rusher, where he is a phenomenal off ball linebacker. I mean, he is the complete package. He's a 3-down guy that can stack against the run, cover the pass, rush the passer. When the league is NFL is a copycat league, whether it be a scheme, whether it be an offensive system. And when guys like Carson Swessinger are having such great success, basically it means, well, we'll take that off-ball linebacker with the 22nd pick or the 18th pick, where in the past we wouldn't consider an off-ball linebacker until after the first round was complete.
One other guy that you had in your ring is Jake Golday.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again,
Same impact.
he's not a great pass rusher, but he's terrific in coverage. He's a dynamo defending the run, and I don't think he's going to go first round. But again, I mean, someone who probably enters the process as a third round pick. I think now you're looking at Galle as a potential top 45 selection in the first 15 picks of round two.
Wow. It's so fascinating to see how the trends
Yeah.
and like you said, how the copycat effect in terms of just trying to project where these guys slot in year to year,
Yeah.
how much it jumps just by the impact of a guy like Carson Swessinger.
And listen, look at the quarterback position. I mean, how many people thought that a quarterback that was under 6'1", 6'2" would be a first round pick, never mind an early first round pick? Baker Mayfield goes, opens up the door to Tua Tagovailoa, opens up the door to Bryce Young. Now, well, these guys haven't panned out, but a, a Kyle Murray. You remember what was Kyle Murray's measurements going to be? But one it happens once, and if there's some success with it or people like it, it multiplies.
Spaghetti can still stick. Hopefully we'll get the spaghetti to stick to the wall again. Uh,
If spaghetti
Trinidad
sticks,
up.
you cooked it too long. But that's
What? Why did I go there with an Italian? My
you know,
that's bad. That's my bad. All right, so Trinidad Chambliss, we got an update on his situation. Not a shock. It's just all part of the process, but we still got an update.
all right. I mean, the NC2A again denied his appeal for another year on the college field. It's going to go into the court system, I believe, this Thursday. It goes to Mississippi State Court. And then we'll have to see what happens. If Mississippi State Court surprises everybody and they agree with the NCAA that he's not eligible, he doesn't have another year of eligibility left, does Trinidad Chambliss take it another step further? If the Mississippi courts say, yeah, sure, you got another year. Good luck with the rebels. Take them to the next level. Does the NC2A appeal and go to a higher court? Uh, why does this matter? Well, if the end result, as we've talked about in this program before, if the end result is we are in March, late March, early April, and the courts decide that Trinidad Chambliss is out of eligibility, what happens then? Does he enter the April draft? Do they have a special supplemental draft for him? It's interesting from that point of view because remember, while this is going on, Trinidad Chambliss is not a combine training. He's not getting ready for pro day workouts. He's not getting ready to interview with teams. He's practicing with his teammates at Mississippi, which is going to have an effect on where he or what portion of the draft he enters, assuming the league even allows him to have a supplemental draft.
Is there I mean, where would you put the percentages at right now in terms of him going back versus him ending up in the draft?
I mean, based on Diego Pavia and some of the other court decisions, I would assume, or my opinion is, he'd be playing for Mississippi in 2026. I mean, there was a story, I didn't get into it. I just read the first couple of lines. There's a basketball player, the guy's played 10 games in the NBA, and now
Came
he's suing
back.
to college to play college basketball. I don't know where it ends, but based on some of the other decisions we've seen, I would tend to think that Chambliss will be playing college football in about 6 months' time.
It's the fascinating to see the guys with so much buzz around them, and what they're looking to do, and the how the NIL money comes into play, and
Well,
you
yeah.
know and we talk about coaches capitalizing on that moment. It's like, should Chambliss should he be striking while the iron is hot and getting into this class versus a very crowded 2027 class?
Potentially crowded 2027 class, but you know what? He's got $6 million coming to him in NIL money. And just let me say for everybody, until a final decision is made, I'm going to keep Trinidad Chambliss on the essentially sports big board. So that's what
Yeah.
he's going to be there. And if the courts say he's going back to, or he can play college football if he wants in 2026, we'll take his name off the board at that time.
Speaking of, let's show everybody that big board. The 2026 NFL Draft Board at Essentially Sports. We want you to get on there, play around. There's more and more being added every week. Where are things at in Tony world right now in terms of the big board?
Yeah, we are speaking on the day after the Super Bowl, Monday the 9th. There will be a large update sent in tonight to the tech guys at Essentially Sports who do a great job on the board. A bit of change in the rankings, specifically guys who did it incredibly well at the Senior Bowl. Not many, no changes at the top. But the other thing is, we're going to have about 99% of the reports for players from the ACC, Conference USA, the American Athletic Conference, the MAC, and the small school guys who are eligible for the draft. So the scouting reports, I think there's about 110 of them. Just finished my Big 12 reports. That's another 80 or so. You'll start when the big board is updated, and I would assume it'll be updated by the end of this week. You'll start to see more and more reports added.
We can't speak for the tech guys, but we know what's coming from Tony. But like you said, the tech guys and what they've been able to do with the board, it's been fun to see. I know they've had a lot of fun working on it. So um, check that out at essentiallysports.com. And again, as I've said to you on the newsletter, folks, play around with the watch list. I think that's and just those sort of functionalities. Um, there's a lot of interactive elements to it. A lot more coming. Constantly going to be updated throughout the draft season. So play around with that for sure. Huge thanks to Tony for all the work that you're putting in on it. Um, all right. So our first interview of this podcast. We're excited to welcome to the show another draft analyst. We had a chance to speak with Devin Jackson from the Philadelphia Inquirer, joining the ES DraftCast. Special guest today. Very excited to have with us Devin Jackson, one of the NFL draft experts from the Philadelphia Inquirer. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, Tim and Tony, and looking forward to this discussion talking about the NFL draft. Obviously, coming off the Shrine and Senior Bowls, and yeah, NFL draft season is well underway, and Super Bowl. The only thing left ahead before everyone, is kind of descend on the NFL draft, and looking forward to who their teams might take.
How'd you get into being a draftnik?
Yeah, so for me, I played football growing up and played in high school, and played in college as well. Played for Lindenwood University, and I played tight end and fullback there. And NFL draft has always been of interest to me. Being a long life football fan and being a guy that followed football throughout my life. The NFL draft was always an interesting thing. Because I kind of crossed over watching college and NFL football and all those things. And I really didn't start following it, until a few or, the same year that I ended up landing a TV job in State College, 2019. And, I've been following it ever since. First I started, covering just the Big Ten prospects and then expanding to all the conferences and all the positions. So I've been following it. I think this is the 6th year, probably. I think sixth full year that I've been following the draft and following it from start to finish. And yes, it's been super fun. Since I enjoyed the Inquirer in 2022, they've asked me to write draft stuff for them, go to all the pre-draft events, and I've gone to two NFL drafts as well in Kansas City, and then this past year in Green Bay. So it's been kind of a fun journey. Obviously, I have a football background in my own life, but player evaluation and looking at the NFL draft and building connections with people within the league. That all takes some time, and I feel like this is probably this year for me has been the best and kind of combining both worlds and being able to do both Shrine and Senior Bowl in one swoop for the first time this year has been super fun.
That was really being thrown into the fire, going to the shrine, especially with the weather this year. Were you able to get around easily? Because I was shocked how they don't plow the roads out there in Frisco.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Yeah, having went to school in the Midwest,
Right.
having a girlfriend that's from the Midwest, and knowing the operation and how easily they plow roads, how often they do it. It was a shock, honestly. Going to the week, you expect Dallas to be a little bit warmer. You expect it a little bit be the weather be a little bit better, but yeah, it was a challenge getting around the snow, and then it iced over, and yeah, it was treacherous conditions, but still find a way to make it there, and get to practice on time and take it all in.
How's the how's the transition been from you being a player to being a player evaluator?
I think for me, understanding kind of the both sides of it, that obviously there's going to be a lot of things put out there about players. There's going to be a lot of approaches that people take. And most of the time, you see more positive things, leading into the draft cycle. A lot of people typically, putting positive things, putting projections out there. But I think it really, you got to also understand, I think for me, like, I focus on what players can do versus, maybe not necessarily what they're not asked to do or what they can't do, but also realizing that they do have weaknesses and things that they can improve. I think there's a delicate balance in the two. And, I think for me, even as a player, I knew the things that I wasn't good at, because I think for you to be a contributor at a college program and to play at that level, you also got to understand, like, you're not going to be a perfect player per se, and there's always small things that you work on daily in the film sessions you get from coaches and even the self scouting that you do with yourself. um, I think it taught me, being a college player, that you need to know what the things are that you aren't good at to get to that next level and to improve as a player, and find those daily things. And also, for me, I knew I wasn't like a physically gifted player, where I was super fast or super strong or all those things. So you try to win on the margins and understanding what coverages are and the blocking schemes, and me playing tight end and fullback, being able to run routes good enough, and also being savvy enough to know that I'm never ever going to pull away from anyone. So I kind of take those lessons as a player into the scouting world, and knowing there's always, I feel like players typically know the things that they need to work on, or and if they're not aware of it, there's something obviously that you need to be made aware of. But I think in terms of player evaluation, I think it's always a nuanced approach, which is always good to get to talk face to face, and talk scheme and talk personally with some of these players, and you get a chance to learn a little bit more about them. And I think it makes you a better evaluator as well, being able to kind of put more of the pieces to the puzzle, because I think ultimately the draft is a puzzle, and finding different tidbits and pieces, and from scouts and from agents and from a player and all those different things, you put it all together to try and really have a cohesive take about a player, cohesive thoughts about a player. And I think the Shrine and Senior Bowl is a good way to really get to do that, get to start there, and then the combine also adds more to it and more pieces to the puzzle. So I think from my experience, being able to kind of take what I know and the experiences that I had, and the recruiting process that I went through, and knowing the limitations I have, being able to kind of translate that to what other players are going through themselves, and have that human element, but also knowing the history of some of the draft picks and the thresholds and all those different things. So it's, again, I think it's all part of the pieces to the puzzle to be able to evaluate accurately, and try to project the best that you can, while also learning from past mistakes and past things as well.
Let's get into the Eagles right away. You mentioned it earlier. Jeff Stoutland, offensive line coach since 2013, and an outstanding offensive line coach, announced today that he was leaving the organization. Did it catch you by surprise?
I definitely think so. You also know, like, coach like that, at some point they're gonna hang it up, but to do it right then and there, was kind of a surprise. I will say it wasn't. It probably wouldn't have been as shocking as like last week when the reporting came out that he had his run game responsibility stripped during the season. I think then you started to see maybe there was more to that. But I think it's a big shock because he loves the offensive line and the scouting aspect of things and being able to be hands on with players. Like he was at the combine last year and putting offensive linemen through drills. Like he loves that part of the process. And obviously his development and what he's done with the Eagles offensive line and maximizing that group, from 2013 on under several different head coaches and regimes to be able to do that at a high level. It's a big shock and a big blow for what the Eagles are known for, which is building through the trenches and the advantage that they have or had with that.
Do you think the change in offensive coordinators kind of fostered this move? Did that have anything to do with it?
Yeah, I think so because they wanted Sean Mannion to come in and be able to build his own staff and uh, from all accounts it sounds like that he's gonna do that and run a different system than the Eagles have run. More of the Shanahan McVay style of offense as opposed to what we've seen in Philly the last 4 or 5 years. So it sounded like from that perspective that Mannion was gonna bring in a completely different offensive system. It's obviously not what Stoutland had run, and he wasn't going to have the run game responsibilities too. So I think that all played a factor into it.
So now he came in 2013. Ironically, that's the same year they drafted Lane Johnson, who soon after he retires will likely be inducted into the Hall of Fame. Do you think this is going to have any immediate impact on Lane Johnson's future with the Eagles?
I think it's definitely going to be a factor in his decision. To say whether or not he's going to do it pretty soon after, I think he's still going to take his time and figure out, recovery process. Will he be ready to go for next year if he did play? So I would anticipate, it could be as soon as the next few days. It could be a couple weeks, but I think Lane Johnson, losing Stoutland, the only offensive line coach he's ever had, I think it will be definitely a factor. But I think overall, Lane is talked about, wanting to play well into his 30s and ideally, by 2027, 2028 was most likely the time and period he was going to hang it up. So, um, I think it's still going to be some time for him to decide, but I think Stoutland leaving will definitely be a big factor in his decision.
Let's get into it in terms of what you saw at the Shrine and Senior Bowl. Chop it up between the two of you a little bit. What stood out for you, biggest Devin, in terms of players or themes that you saw at the Shrine and Senior Bowls?
Yeah, for me, I thought the secondary groups at both the Shrine and Senior Bowl were really strong. I think for Shrine, Devin Marshall, NC State corner, was the first guy that came to mind for me. And going to the week, I really liked him. Was a guy that probably in that fourth, fifth round range, day three, early day three. But I really think his performance, his ability to mirror, his ability to challenge at the line of scrimmage against receivers and to disrupt timing, be able to transition fluidly out of his back pedal. He did it really all through. I believe he only practiced 2 days at Shrine, but he showed that he was a dominant player, one of the best players down in Frisco, and I think that also carried over a little bit to Senior Bowl and what some guys were able to do. Chris Johnson, San Diego State corner. I didn't think he got off to a strong start during the week, but over the course of the next couple of days, he really put together some strong performances. Julian Neal, the Arkansas corner, I also thought he had a strong week. Avery Smith going back to the Shrine Bowl, a guy that can play some nickel, can play corner, continuing that tradition of Toledo's secondary players going to the NFL. I think he's next up. Next, a really good player that I think he'll get drafted on day three, probably play nickel at the NFL level and find a nice long career. So I was really impressed by the corner position. And then the safety position as well. Bud Clark, the nickel slash safety hybrid player, had an outstanding week. The TCU player, just absolute dominant. Was able to force incompletions, in on tackles. Obviously, he had the ball production, the tout as well at TCU. and that carried over at the Senior Bowl. Cole Wisniewski, the safety from Texas Tech, he did a little bit of everything. He played some linebacker, he played some safety, just like he did in his career. And at Shrine, I thought he had a really good week, being able to break up passes. Defend tight ends one on one, be able to showcase some of his versatility as a player. I was really fascinated by him coming into week two because you look at him up close, he's really lengthy and tall, and a well built player. And I don't think he's going to be the most explosive athlete, but a guy that you could make an argument maybe you like him better at linebacker, maybe you like him better at safety. And he's shown the ability to do both in his college career. So I really like what I saw from him up close. So I think in those groups, and specifically the secondary group, I really liked what they showed. Being able to challenge receivers at the line of scrimmage and being able to disrupt timing and all those different things. I think Colton Hill was another guy coming into the week at the Senior Bowl. I thought could have a really big week. He didn't look as dominant as you would hoped as a guy as a potential first round pick, but he recouped some of that later in the week and was able to look a little better than he did the first day or first day and a half. So I think overall, if you're looking for those two position groups in this draft, you felt really good coming out of the Shrine Senior Bowl week that you're going to find a guy, after the first round. I thought the depth of this class is really strong.
You mentioned secondary as a need for the Eagles. They drafted a lot. They've drafted a lot, used a lot of early draft capital in the secondary, and they've done a good job. I mean, Quentin Mitchell, DeJohn Cooper, Andrew Mabuka. They traded for Michael Carter. Yet it always seems to be a need for the team. Why do you think that is?
I think they, obviously of recently, they really started to invest the group a little bit more. But I also think the emergence of nickel defenses, specifically with Vic Fangio's scheme, has emphasized it even more because, you would think on paper like Cooper DeJean, maybe he could be the CB2, maybe he can play the corner opposite Aquinion Mitchell. But I think for the Eagles, they have been so good, especially on the defensive line. When the investments that they put in it, linebacker, they put investments in that recently too, in drafting that position. And then the CB2 spot, it felt like they were trying to, cut corners a little bit and being able to have this expensive offense and, have Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata under contract and extending Landon Dickerson and, obviously getting Saquon Barkley and extending him and AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, that there were going to be natural holes on this roster. And unfortunately for them, the CB2 spot, wasn't a position that they felt needed to be super valuable. And that's why they kind of tried to cut corners with Dory Jackson being in that spot. They were hoping Keely Ringo, who they took in the fourth round a couple years ago, was going to develop into that spot. So I think for them in the secondary piece, they've tried to balance, spending high draft capital versus letting guys develop a little bit. So they didn't have to pay, a big money corner to be opposite Queen Mitchell, especially after Darius Slay left in free agency last offseason. So I think for them, it's a position that they're going to have to draft. Whether they do it early or not will be remain to be seen. But they need more options. Obviously, Quinion Mitchell, who will probably be signing an extension maybe next year or the year after. Cooper DeJean is at best playing that nickel spot, and I think they want to kind of keep that secondary as is with those two core pieces. And I think the CB2 spot is a spot that needs to be upgraded, but also they need the money to be able to pay some of their stars like Jalen Carr and Quinion Mitchell, and maybe Jahad Campbell down the line, and Jordan Davis, all those players, all those core players on their defense. I think they're trying to figure out and allocate the funds correctly. And I think for that CB2 spot, it's probably going to be manned by, a young player or someone they get on a discount.
Tim Wood, Tony Pauline here on the ES DraftCast. We're here with guest Devin Jackson from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Devin, in terms of the Eagles draft this year, they've got a total of 8 draft picks, 3 compensatory picks, 5 draft picks overall. What do you want them to do, and what do you think they're gonna do?
Yeah, I mean, I want them to figure out a plan B for when Lane Johnson retires, which could be imminent this offseason, could be next offseason. Um, I don't think they have the guy waiting in the wings right now on roster. I know they took Cam Williams and Miles Hinton late last year, but I don't think those guys really factor in to being a starter anytime soon. They're both developmental guys, and just Stoutland leaving, I think really kind of changes the equation. So I think for me in the first round, I would like them to go after right tackle of the future, um, or upgrade the tight end position. I think those are two positions that I would like to see them upgrade. Dallas Goddard is a free agent this year, obviously, and or this offseason, and I think he's a guy that obviously had big career numbers, but with this shift in their offensive philosophy that's coming this offseason, bringing in Charmaine, they need a player that can do both receiving and blocking. And I think a guy like Kenyon Sadiq would make a lot of sense and kind of fill in that position. If they don't go, Kenyon Sadiq in the first round, a guy like Max Clare, I think could make a lot of sense in on day two. But I think those two positions to me feel like urgent need to address immediately. What I think they will do though is edge rusher wise, I think will make a lot of sense for them in round one, especially even if they bring back Jalen Phillips. I think uh, they would like more bodies to kind of get back to that defense that dominated with the edge rusher room and edge rusher capital that they had when they won the Super Bowl. When they had Josh Sweat and Mel Williams on that defensive line, along with the other guys they currently still have the roster, like Jalex Hunt and Nolan Smith. And it feels like they want to be able to get back to that point, and I'm just not sure if they're going to pay Jalen Phillips the money that maybe he'll command. So I think edge rusher will be a top of their need board in terms of what they might end up doing. I could see cornerback being a potential there in round one, two. But to me, if they're getting back to their roots and what they like to do, they like to build through the offensive line and defensive line, and especially with the lack of pressure they were able to put on San Francisco in that playoff game. I can see edge rusher being, their major, thing that they position that they go after in round one, organizationally at least.
Given the overview of the draft, and it is deep at the edge rusher position, do you think that they would lean more towards cornerback in round one and get an edge rusher later on? Or you think Howie Roseman's like, I'm just going to take the best player available at either of those two positions, if in fact that's his strategy?
Yeah, I think it'll be best player available, and it's a player maybe and we saw this with Jahad Campbell last year, maybe a player they didn't
Yeah.
think that was going to be there. So I think they're always a team that likes to go best player available, guy they have top of their board. And we'll see how it shakes out. I think with the different voices in their room, especially on the offensive side of the ball, maybe things change a little bit. Maybe they feel differently and where they want to upgrade. And obviously that depends a lot on what happens in free agency, in my opinion. But as it stands today, if it's between edge rusher and corner, I just think it'll simply come down to the player that they value most, and feels like it fits their kind of timeline of guys that can come in and contribute immediately because they're a team that's operating in still win now mode. So I don't think they can really afford to take a guy in the first round that isn't going to play potentially next year. I think they're kind of pressed for time a little bit if they want to kind of extend their Super Bowl window.
Roseman has rolled the dice on injured guys in the past, or guys that have injury histories, and it's come up. It's come up great for him. Where you look at Landon Dickerson, all of his injury history in college. You look at Jahad Campbell, who had shoulder issues. Do you think there'd be any, assuming they were looking at cornerback and Jermad McCoy it was there? Do you think there'd be any hesitation to take a guy like that, the Jermad McCoy, the cornerback from Tennessee who didn't play last year because of a knee injury suffered in January? Could they potentially trade up? for a guy like McCoy? Do you see that potentially happening?
I think it would depend on if they feel very strongly about the player. But I think McCoy would make a lot of sense if they do decide to trade up at corner, and he's a guy that falls, in late teens and then early 20s. I can see it. I think that's a realistic scenario where that can happen. I think for them, they also kind of want a guy too that can complement their defense and do things, really well at the second cornerback position. So I'd be certainly interested in seeing like if there was a player like that, falling down the board a little bit, and they felt really interested in him. I could see a scenario where that could make it work, and they felt like he was one of their best players on their board. I certainly think that's within the realm of possibility, and I think McCoy would be a worthy candidate to do so, and maybe roll a dice on a guy like you said that missed all of this season, this past season, and a really good player when he's on the field, but you do wonder about the injury history a little bit too, especially the cornerback position, because I feel like more than any position in the first round, if there's a guy like a cornerback that was injured in college, you feel a little bit more hesitant taking them in that first round.
Devin, really appreciate you joining us here. I got one more question for you. If you were able to get Howie Roseman's ear, and there was one guy that you saw at the Senior Shrine Bowl, late round, when you can take some rolls of the dice. If there's one guy that might not be on the radar where it comes to the Eagles right now that really impressed you, who's that guy?
Yeah, this is a good question. Emil Wagner, the Notre Dame tackle, I think. I got a chance to talk with him, and the traits, man. The traits are there. Everything that you look for in kind of that future player. Um, Especially the right tackle position. That's a position that he played in college too. Notre Dame known for developing really good offensive tackle prospects. I will roll a dice on him, man. Especially if you don't take a tackle, the first two picks you have in a draft, third round guy that could maybe start in a year or so. A guy that has the athleticism that you kind of look for. Still developing and getting better at the position. The progress you saw from him from day one to the last day, I felt like you can get him in the building and feel pretty good about his development. So, Emil Wagner is probably the pick for me. High character guy. I think he won like the community service, player of the year award at Notre Dame. Like everything that you hear about him in the game and talk to him, I think matches exactly what the Eagles are looking for. Every year they have like a red star player that a scout pounds the table for within the Eagles organization. A guy like Sidney Brown, he won it or had been that guy before. I could see Emil Wagner being that type of player for the Eagles, where Scout feels really strongly about him. And the Eagles did have a lot of scouts down at the Shrine Bowl watching practice. So I could see Wagner being that guy for them. And I think late on day two will make a lot of sense. And being a potential future right tackle of the Eagles, I think as well, especially with them going more to potentially a more movement outside zone based team. I think he fits a lot of that, a lot of those skill sets.
Tony, you've been doing this for a little bit. I'm just curious, if you had one piece of advice to give to Devin in terms of with your longevity in the scouting game, what would you say to somebody that's a little, still finding their flow in the player evaluation game?
Go with your first instinct. Don't doubt yourself. If you read something that somebody else wrote that may contradict what you believe in, feel about a player, believe in a player, because all too often, or I haven't done it too often, but when I do it, I usually end up wrong, and it comes back to my first instinct. So if you're doing the work, you're watching the film, just go with your first instinct on a player, because that's usually the best.
Good deal, guys. Tony, any last thoughts from you? Any last questions?
No, I like the thought of Emil Wagner because he's absolutely, you mentioned it of the athleticism that absolutely fits uh, the Eagles scheme. I got to ask you before we leave the elephant in the room. I mean, if you had to put a bet on it, is AJ Brown on the roster this September? The Eagles roster this September?
For a long time, or for the last couple of weeks, I've been kind of thinking about this, and my answer would have been no. But it feels like if you're going to give a guy like Sean Mannion the full offensive reign and let him build out his staff, I think you got to give him a chance to try and make it work with AJ Brown and try to keep him on the roster. So I'm leaning towards that he's going to stay on the roster at this current juncture. I just think you can't, bring in a guy that, is inexperienced calling plays, and you're trying to keep the Super Bowl window open. And financially, you're going to have to eat a big cap hit, potentially. So I think he's on a roster in September. If things don't go well, though, the first month or two, I could see them moving off him before a trade deadline. But I think right now the way that they're constructing their offensive staff and the way that they're operating and a bunch of new voices in the room, it would be a disservice to Mannion and that staff to, kind of put an arm behind his back by trading away AJ Brown.
Boy, Roseman is so good diplomatically, though, isn't he? I mean, to put that out there right after the season, saying, we still, AJ Brown's still a great player. We still want him in the room. I do feel like he's probably got one, like you said, give Mannion a shot at him, but he's got one strike left of being an idiot.
Yeah, yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see unfold. I just think it's hard to say because like you can see a scenario where he's gone and they get a handsome, return back, you feel pretty good about it. But man, it would just be a tough sell for Eagles fans to, say you're going to change the offense, do all these moves, change everything. Stoutland leaves, and then you're trading AJ Brown on top of that. That will be a tough sell for fans.
Absolutely. Devin, really appreciate you. Read his work at Philadelphia Inquirer, phillyinquirer.com. And we hope to see you down the road. Really appreciate you joining the DraftCast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Joy to talk to both of you guys.
Again, a huge thank you to Devin Jackson from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Uh, was at the Shrine and Senior Bowls, obviously with an eagle eye, so to speak, on looking for Eagles prospects. But Tony, what'd you think just in terms of just his takes around the Shrine and Senior Bowls and some of the different prospects he highlighted?
Well, first thing is I'm glad to see that wasn't the only guy that was shocked that Dallas doesn't take snow off the road. So I mean, started things right for me. I was a bit surprised that he was so high on the cornerbacks. I wasn't that high on the cornerbacks, on the defensive backs in general, except for a few safeties like the ones he named. I believe Bud Clark, the safety from TCU, played really well. The corners themselves, in general, and even the teams I spoke with, teams I was sitting with, they weren't as high as he seemed to be. Primarily day three guys that are going to be dime backs. We'll see how it plays out.
I felt in a way he was looking through an Eagles prism there in terms of team need.
He
That's why he
absolutely.
was kind of
Yeah.
hyping those guys perhaps a little bit more.
I'm sure as part of his duties and coverages with the Philadelphia Inquirer, with cornerback being a need for the team, it was like, okay, he's not going to really look at the running backs that much. He's not going to look at the quarterbacks all that much, but he's going to keep an eye on the cornerbacks. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see what happens on draft day and further past that if these guys pan out or not.
What'd you think in terms of just his Eagles observations?
I mean, it was interesting the fact that why they got rid of Stout, that he wasn't overly surprised that they got rid of Stoutland. The fact that he thinks bringing in a new offensive coordinator will basically mean that they're going to keep AJ Brown unless they're blown away. What I failed to ask him, and I wish I had, if we could go back, is about the relationship between Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown. Can they function together? Is that a problem, or is that just media hype and a lot of media hullabaloo? But it is interesting to say the fact that he feels they're going to keep all these pieces in place to give Sean Mannion, the new offensive coordinator, uh, the best opportunity.
You know, at the end of the day, the dude just wants to eat, and I get it. I get it. It go. It's throw me the damn ball sort of mentality, right? I mean, it's nothing new, but it's a matter of how you go about it, right? And how much even that public posturing can hurt the private relationship.
Absolutely. But the fact is this, Jalen Hurts, as far as I'm concerned, when I watch the Eagles from afar, because I don't watch them every week, but he's reliant on these guys.
Yeah,
Saquon Barkley doesn't have a good season. Jalen Hurts struggles. When AJ Brown is out with injury, Jalen Hurts struggles. So I think I agree with you, but I think AJ Brown realizes what a big piece of the pie he is for the Eagles offense.
absolutely. All right, let's turn to the scouts notebook. You have been since you got you before now since you've been back, you have been in the bunker, so to speak, and just all up in the film work.
Right.
Um, what what stood out for you in terms of non-senior, non-Shrine Bowl players that you've been scouting?
Yeah, just to give people an idea how I do my film work. I do it by conference, and then I do it by team alphabetically in conference. So I'm just finishing up the Big Ten. We'll get Wisconsin done. Go back and do a couple other guys. Start off with Illinois, who's the first team in the conference, and depending on the talent level of each school, I can watch as few as three, as many as six games or more from that school. So that's how I got. That's how I do my film work. And what I went through and I said, we've talked about guys who did well at the Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl. Those are names everyone knows about. What about guys that didn't play there? And a couple of interior offensive linemen and a couple of receivers have really stood out to me. The first one would be Emmanuel Pregnon of Oregon. People talk about Isaiah World. We talk about Dante Moore. Olivea, I'm not going to butcher this. Olivea Ayanoe of Penn State is widely considered the number one interior offensive lineman. But when I watched Pregnon, I was like, man, this guy is not that far off from being the number one guard in the draft. I like him. I don't think he's going to be the number one guard in the draft. But I mean, he has it all. He's not as dominant as Oliveira is, the Penn State guard, but he is a masher that drives opposing defensive linemen off the ball. He can pull across the line of scrimmage and get out on the second level and block in motion. The scheme versatility, the power, the nastiness of his game just really stood out to me. And I'm looking at it right now. Seattle won the Super Bowl. They probably could use more help on the interior offensive line. Maybe they take a flyer on him at number 32. If they don't take a flyer on him at number 32, I think Pregnon, who played last year at Oregon after spending most of his college career at USC, will be off the board within the first 10 picks of round two. That's how dominant he is on film. Unless something pops up as far as injuries concerned or he tests poorly at the combine, this guy is a complete scheme versatile interior offensive lineman. The other kid that stood out to me was Billy Schrauth of Notre Dame. As dominant as Pregnon, powerful, nasty, doesn't have the same movement skills. But again, he is someone who no one talks about. I have him as a fourth round prospect right now. I think he could slide into the late part of round three, late part of day two, more of a power gap blocking lineman. But someone who I think people are just not paying enough attention to. And then the last interior offensive lineman, Inez Cooper of Miami. We talk about Marioga, their other offensive tackle, the left tackle was at the Senior Bowl. Cooper wasn't there. Maybe he's injured. Maybe he's just tired from playing, into the middle part of January in the national championship game. But again, a tough, dominant, power blocking lineman. Came into the season graded as a street free agent by NFL scouts. I think he cemented himself as a late round pick. And sometimes those interior offensive linemen, the center of guards, you get them in the 6th or 7th round, and they could be starters on Sunday. And I think that's what you're looking at with Cooper, especially if he's in the right system. That right system being a power gap system.
A guy like Cooper, what is the tape that stands out? I mean, we talk so much about how these games towards, these playoff games, one game's not going to make a difference. But what about Cooper? Was it the consistency throughout the season, or was it moments where he excelled in matchups?
Well, he was consistent, but I think the one aspect was his ability to just overwhelm opponents, dominate opponents, especially run blocking, just driving them off the line of scrimmage, opening holes up for Mark Fletcher, and that consistency as a run blocker. You're not going to ask him to pull across the line of scrimmage or block in motion too much. That's not his game. But if you run a scheme like the Pittsburgh Steelers or somebody like that, and you want a guy that's just going to mash the opponents up front, I think Cooper is going to be a terrific selection late in day 3.
You got a couple of wide receivers that
Yeah.
have caught your eye.
Junior Vanderas of Toledo. Toledo's got a couple of good prospects. We've talked about Avery Smith at the Shrine Bowl, Emmanuel McNeil Warren, who didn't show up at the Senior Bowl. Vanderas is a late 7th priority free agent type. 82 receptions last year, 1,800 receiving yards, 11 TDs. He's quick. He's explosive. He's also small, 5'7.5", 170 pounds. But the league is not shy about taking smaller receivers if they run great routes and are able to separate from defenders in their routes, and if they catch the ball well. And Van Der Ross does both incredibly well. Don't doubt we're going to see him at the combine. The official list hasn't been put out there. He's probably going to have to work out at his pro day. I think the difference between Van Der Ross being selected in the 7th round and not being drafted at all, how fast does he run in the 40? Can he get under 4 or 5 seconds? Because you can't be small and not run fast. If you do that, you're not going to get drafted. But still, even as a priority free agent, if you're looking for a smaller slot receiver that has return skills, I think Van Der Ross is a guy you want to at least give a chance in camp this summer. And then Anthony Smith of East Carolina, 64 receptions for 1,053 yards. He's the opposite. He's 6'2". He's 190 pounds. He runs in the 4.3s. He plays that fast. Just played at East Carolina where the quarterback play was up and down. He was the number 1 guy. Did get invited late to the Shrine Bowl. Didn't get 3 days of practice there. But there's a guy that really stands out on film. And when I check with people to see if I was correct in my assumption and my opinions, they said, yeah, we think he's going to be a 5th round pick, Anthony Smith, and he's got tremendous upside. Just a matter of coaching him properly and harvesting all that talent onto the football field.
How do these guys? I mean, obviously, you mentioned late invite to the Shrine Bowl. Pregnon got a late invite to the Senior Bowl, but I mean, like, how do these guys not end up on these Prospect Bowl rosters?
Well, what happens is the league comes out with midseason grades. The scouting services for the NFL teams comes out with midseason grades, and that will basically dictate the invitation list for the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl, the American Bowl and the Hula Bowl. Kind of pick everybody else up. I think Anthony Smith was in the Hula Bowl, if I am not mistaken. And that what happens. Then there's maybe an injury or a guy backs out, and they'll pull up somebody from the American Bowl. That's what happened with the Maryland tackle who played so well at the Senior Bowl. But it's basically based on grades, and the grades are opinions. They're opinions of the area scouts who go to the Marylands, who go to the East Carolinas, who go to the Toledos, and grade these guys. And that's why sometimes you'll have a player like the Alan Herron, the Maryland offensive tackle, who wasn't graded at all coming into the season. Now all of a sudden he's getting the late round grades, and he's getting an invitation to the American Bowl, plays well there, gets bumped up to the Senior Bowl.
Absolutely. All right, so let's take a look back. Let's hit the look back machine here. You got an interesting story involving Steve Hutchinson.
This is a fun story. Now, I've been going to the Senior Bowl every year since 2000. This year was my 27th year, I believe, at the Senior Bowl. When I first went in 2000, nobody was there. None of the draft analysts were there. Mel Kiper showed up one day and was in the top row of the bleachers and just walked back and forth talking to people. 2001, after I was there the first year, the prior year, everybody showed up. Um, but I'm sure everyone who's watching this show is familiar with the movie Rudy. And people have either watched it once or like me, you probably watched it 25 times. It's a great movie in large
Whenever
part
it's
because
on, yeah.
and it was on Saturday night, which is kind of
Yeah.
ironic. There's a scene.
You
There's a
saw it
scene in the
too.
movie. Yeah, there's a scene in Rudy where he's playing for the scout team. He's playing defensive end, and the pulling guard comes around, and the pulling guard, rather than basically burying Rudy, just kind of shoves him away and goes on. And the pulling guard gets screamed at by Rudy and the coach. You got to hit me. You got to make believe you got to play football. Of course, the next play, the pulling guard comes across and buries Rudy, and then Neeson says, "Stay down." Stay the hell down or whatever he says, and just annihilated him. Well, something like that took place in the 2001 Senior Bowl, which was absolutely hysterical. Steve Hutchinson was being used. It was during team, and he got out and he just buried a linebacker by the name of Zeke Moreno from USC into the ground, where it was Zeke. He basically Hutchinson got up and looked at Zeke Moreno and called him a bitch, and Zeke Moreno got up and you could see the fear in Zeke Moreno's face as to what just happened. And it was a wow moment. We talk about viral moments now, like the Derek Moore knocking the big offensive tackle from Miami back on his rear end. 2001, there were no smartphones, there were no
No,
camera phones. If there were, this would be a viral moment that would have continued played on every year at
every
the
year.
senior. That's how impactful it was, to the point where Steve Hutchinson went on to be the 17th pick of the 2001 NFL draft. It was a wonderful career, five-time Pro Bowler. He was as dominant in the NFL as he was that day during Senior Bowl practice. Zeke Moreno turned out to be a fifth-round pick of the San Diego Chargers. I think he played in the NFL for 6 years, ended up in the CFL. But anyone who was there that day will remember that moment where Steve Hutchinson basically, for lack of a better word, for lack of a better term, sent Zeke Moreno to China. The way he buried him into the field, got up, called him a nasty word, and then Zeke Moreno was just like, he looked like he'd rather be on the other side of the earth, which he almost was with the way Steve Hutchinson buried him. But he didn't want to be a Senior Bowl practice after what he had just experienced.
And I mean, how did that impact? How did that impact Zeke Moreno's just trajectory in terms of what he hoped to get out of the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, like I said, he was a fifth round pick, and he was a good off ball linebacker that I think people were considering it late third round. Whether that one single play affected his NFL draft stock, I don't know, but there was a definite look of fear on his face when he got off the ground after Hutchinson buried him.
That's the original Rudy story. Very nice, very nice. All right, let's hit the fan mailbag. Huge shout out to our viewers and readers. Again, uh, the Ask Tony function on the DraftCast newsletter. Uh, you get the show on all of the podcast platforms. We're available everywhere now. Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your favorite podcasts, Spotify, of course. Um, but we want to hear your questions. We got more of them this week. First question this week: what do you think the Chiefs are more likely to do, Tony? Trade up, down, or stay put at number 9, and why?
I think right now, I don't think they're going to trade up. I mean, they need players at several positions. Uh, you know, despite the fact that they had a great run, there are holes on the team. I don't know that they're going to trade down. I think right now, with the ninth pick, they're very likely to stay put. Why is that? Well, they need they need receivers and they need a running back. And there's a very good chance they're going to get either or with the ninth pick, and they can get a premier player at running back if Jeremiah Love happens to fall to them. If they want to take one of the receivers, either Carnell Tate or of Ohio State or Jordan Tyson of Arizona State, I think both will be available to them. So I don't know that trading up makes much sense. I think they're going to stay put and they'll get a good player that fits a need.
That was from Trevor Avery from Mississippi. Huge shout out to Trevor. Jerry Patton from Pennsylvania asks, will the Steelers draft a quarterback in the early rounds, or will they wait another cycle for the more loaded, or, as we say, the supposed loaded class?
Yeah. I mean, they're going to, obviously they have a new coach and Mike McCarthy. So a lot will depend on that. I think they'd like to draft a quarterback. Do they take Ty Simpson with that selection? Do they think Ty Simpson is worth that selection? Is Trinidad Chambliss part of the equation? And if he is he a Mike McCarthy type of quarterback? I think it's something that they'll consider. Obviously, as I wrote last week in my team needs mock draft piece, I mean, Aaron Rodgers would like to return for another season. That was confirmed, I believe, yesterday by ESPN. Does Mike McCarthy want Aaron Rodgers back? I think the best option is they have needs up front on defense. They obviously need a receiver desperately. I mean, am I taking a Ty Simpson over, say, a Jordan Tyson if Tyson's there, or a Mekhi Lemon? No, I would take the receiver first because the receiver is much higher rated, and then stick with Rodgers for another year. Maybe get a quarterback later on. I mean, they did take a quarterback late in the process in the 2025 draft, and Will Howard, I don't think he has a future as a starter. But again, I think if a good receivers there, or top-rated receivers there, they go with the receiver, considering where that position is right now, and they could have Aaron Rodgers back for another year.
Just a kind of flashback question for you. You talked about is there a quarterback that McCarthy is kind of secretly pining over in this class? How soon did I'm trying to recall myself, how soon did the buzz around Payton and Bo Nix and that sort of love affair, did that come out at all ahead, or did that really start to like percolate out on draft day?
Yeah, I remember that because I was part of it, and it was Sean Payton put it out there that he loved J.J. McCarthy. And then he got everybody believing that he loved J.J. McCarthy, and J.J. McCarthy was going to be his guy. And when J.J. McCarthy, the Vikings trade up, I think they trade up one spot with the Jets to get J.J. McCarthy. Peyton's scheme, is what he's put out in the media worked because he didn't want J.J. McCarthy. He wanted Bo Nix. I think later on in the process, it became apparent that Bo Nix was the guy. And I remember talking about how the Philadelphia Eagles were going to consider trading up to get Quinton Mitchell, and then the Denver Broncos with Payton would trade down to get Bo Nix, because really no one thought Bo Nix was a top 15 prospect.
Yeah.
A lot of people thought he was a first round prospect.
No.
The trade never came to fruition. Sean Payton and the Broncos got the quarterback they wanted, although people thought at the time he was selected a bit early. And then Quinton Mitchell just happened to fall into the laps of the Philadelphia Eagles and Harry Roseman, as things usually work out for Harry Roseman in the draft. So both teams were happy.
I just remember thinking when they interviewed Payton after the pick, there was no way, he was so effusive. There's
Yep.
no way that this was a PR generated response. Like this was this was hours and hours of film work and like targeting and just like a giddy 8-year-old on Christmas getting the BB gun he wanted,
I remember talking to one of my sources in Denver who had a 3-hour dinner with Payton at the combine. and Payton gushing over J.J. McCarthy. That's why everyone thought the pick was J.J. McCarthy up until the final few days before the draft.
Now, is that could be true, right? It's not like it's not. Maybe he did like JJ McCarthy, but he liked Knicks more, or was it just all pure posturing?
No, I think it was 99% posturing and getting misinformation out there. Although, like I said, in the week before the draft, it became apparent that Knicks was their guy.
You are very transparent in how you evaluate, and I am just really curious. Like, having been in this for so long, how do you know when you're being when you're being used for information or when
Uh,
it's legit?
well, you got to rely on the source. You got to look at your source. I've had all kinds of stuff thrown my way, and a lot of it I don't go with. I mean, there have been some people who've tried to. It's funny because I talked to Drew Fabianich, Senior Bowl director, about this, and he talked about how agents are always pushing guys on him. And Drew says to the agent, "Well, what do you think of him?" Because he knows the agent hasn't watched him. The agent is just basically regurgitating other opinions. And I've had people push players on me. Oh, he's a second round pick. He's a second round pick. And I'll say, he's not going to be a second round pick on the last day of the draft. To send it back to him. You got to trust your source. You got to understand where the information is coming from, process a situation. I will also check it out with other people to find out what other people think. If other people say it's a load of crap, I may not go. I won't go with it. But you've got to. It's the source, and then it's back up on the source.
I remember we had a brief conversation about an agent, maybe a week, 10 days ago, and you said something like, "I wouldn't trust him to, I wouldn't trust him to tell me if the sun was out that day or not."
Well, I said to well, yeah, we won't mention the agent's name, but you gave me the
Yeah.
information. I said if that agent told me the sun rises from the east and sets from the west, I would. Yeah. So
Good stuff. All right, last question. Which is the most stacked position group in this draft class? Like how it was deep at running back last year.
yeah, well, I think we mentioned one of the positions earlier, off-ball linebacker. It's a terrific off-ball linebacker draft. You're going to get good off-ball linebackers in the first round, second round, third round. You can even get some good guys in day 3 of the draft that are going to be nickel linebackers. That's how good it is. That's how stacked it is. That's how deep it is at the position. I also think pass rusher is also a really good position. You're going to get good pass rushers in the first round, in the early part of the first round, but there'll be good guys and day 2, players that could start on Sunday, and even day 3, guys that can be situational pass rushers. So your defensive front 7, not a good tackle class, but your edge rushers and your off-ball linebackers, I think, are positions where it's really deep.
And that's from Pacey in New Jersey. So huge thank you to Pacey and Jerry and Trevor and all the folks who've sent in questions for the mailbag over the coming weeks. Keep them coming. Keep them coming, and we'll be answering them as much as we can. Couple questions just coming off of the Super Bowl, Tony.
Uh,
What was your scout report on Kenneth? I mean, this is not a shock, right? I mean,
no.
Kenneth Walker. If you're a fantasy guy, Kenneth Walker's been a stud, and even in the timeshare, so to speak, with Charbonnet. When Charbonnet got hurt, uh, we knew Walker was going to get more spotlight, but. Uh, a lot of people seemed shocked by what he did in the Super Bowl. Your scouting report of him coming out.
Yeah, I looked it up before the show. 2022, he was my number 3 rated back after Brees Hall and Isaiah Spiller. Brees Hall has had a terrific career. I'm looking at it right here. Walker's a hard-charging ball carrier that was a touchdown machine in college and displayed a variety of skill carrying the ball. Basically, he was a home run hitter at Michigan State who didn't catch the ball that much because they didn't need to throw him the ball. And I loved his ability to be a big play back, which he showed yesterday, which he showed throughout his career. I thought he had to learn to do a better job catching the ball out of the backfield. And I think what they did, bringing in Zach Charbonnet as the more powerful interior ball carrier, and the way those guys feed off of each other, they complement each other. I thought was just another great move by John Schneider, the general
Absolutely.
manager of the Seattle Seahawks. I liked Walker a lot. I had him graded as a second round pick. I think he was the 41st selection of the draft that year, which means he went top 12 in top 10 in round two, I should say. Liked his skills. Just a little bit concerned about his pass catching ability because they didn't throw him the ball that much at Michigan State.
And it takes tread off the tire, right? It leaves them that much fresher when you've got the dual back system like they have. It leaves them that much fresher later in the season.
No, or his career, absolutely. Well, when it's 3rd and 2 or you're in a goal line situation, you don't need Kenneth Walker because you got Zach Charbonnet.
So my son is a huge basketball guy, getting into football more and more, and he was one of those. He was one of those folks that like saw what Walker was doing yesterday. I was like, "Who's this Kenneth Walker guy?" I'm like, "He's not a full on shock. He's battled some injuries. He's battled being available consistently, but there was no doubt in terms of his big play explosiveness and his ability to shake tackles,
And
which he
I
showed.
think a lot of that goes to Klint Kubiak, the ability to balance the run and the pass. And that's why, you didn't see Sam Darnold throw any interceptions in the postseason because they had such a good running game and they used it. Again, go back to the top of the show. I was wondering why the Patriots didn't go to Travion Henderson, who was a
Yeah.
big play back himself in that game, especially when Drake May, maybe he was injured, I don't know. Especially when Drake May was struggling, where Seattle, basically relied on both the run and the pass.
Any other rookie draft picks for the Seahawks that stood out to you in terms of guys that made a difference that were on your board coming out?
Oh, Gray Zabel. I mean, you're watching Kenneth Walker, and it's usually you basically see Gray Zabel ahead of him, opening up huge holes. Everybody talks about Emmanuel, the safety, who's had a terrific year, and he made some
Sure.
plays yet. Absolutely deserves all the credit. But I mean, Gray Zabel, that was the Seahawks offensive line, especially the interior offensive line. I don't want to say it was a disaster, but it was a position of major need. And I thought Gray Zabel played incredibly well throughout the season, and you saw him make a lot of key blocks in the Super Bowl yesterday.
And again, you when you can get those 5-6 yard runs on first and second down, and you can take the pressure off of Sam Darnold to not force decisions and take that stressor off the table, they become that much more dangerous of a team.
Yeah, and the other rookie, and again, everybody talks about Emmanuel. I thought Riley Mills, has played well. You follow the story. Riley Mills, the big interior defensive tackle from Notre Dame, was tore knee ligament in the first round of the college playoffs in 2024 against Indiana. For him to come back to play the season, especially the way he played against the Patriots in the Super Bowl, made some big plays. Credit to him. And Snyder has a way of drafting players that fit the system. Sometimes it doesn't work out. There was a string of first round busts there, but you get a guy like Riley Mills in the fifth round, an interior defensive lineman to make plays for you like that. That is major.
All right, Tony, one last question for you.
Yeah.
In terms of the Seahawks and, hyperbole, and everybody's trying to figure out, are they going to be a dynasty? So impressive coming off of the win. What past Super Bowl team do you think is built most similarly to this Seahawks roster?
Yeah, I'm going to go way back. I'm going to the 2001 Baltimore Ravens roster. I mean, they had
Oh,
a
wow.
situation where Elvis Gerbach was basically had his career resurrected, won the Super Bowl, but they had a dominant defense. You know, guys like Ray Lewis, Peter Bulware, Dwayne Starks. The starting running back was Terry Allen, who had a real good season. But I think it was sort of that team ball on offense and the dominant defense that led the way for their Super Bowl championship.
Wow, that's a nice grab. That's a nice Elvis, bringing Elvis into the
There
discussion.
you go.
Very nice. All right, sir. That's a wrap on another episode of the ES Draftcast. Again, catch us on YouTube, obviously, and then all of your favorite podcast platforms. And we will be with you back at it next week here on the ES Draftcast with Tony Pauline. Tony, have a great week.
You as well, everybody. Thanks for watching.